In 1956, Lou wrote his biography, a book called Devil at My Heels, that told of his life's adventure. And the book was optioned by Universal Studios to be made into a movie.
They called me and wanted to buy the story for Tony Curtis. And so we came to an agreement and we signed up.
But then Tony Curtis ended up taking the movie Spartacus. And so the project was abandoned.
Every year they kept saying, we're going to wait till next year, and pretty soon they just forgot about it.
During that time, he put bread on the table and put a roof over our heads by speaking about his story at various churches.
I thought it would make a great movie, you know.
Yeah.
Why haven't they made a movie out of it
Yeah.
yet? Well, I don't know, you know.
I realized, wow, this has been shelved for decades. I wonder if this is ever going to happen.
I first came across Louis' story while I was researching Seabiscuit, which was my first book subject. And I got an original clipping about Seabiscuit from 1938. I turned it over, and on the back there was an article about a running phenom named Louis Zamperini.
She read that in the old newspaper where the Times called my coach and said, Louis hasn't lost a mile race for 5 years. If he loses this year, who do you think's going to beat him? He said, Seabiscuit.
I was really fascinated, and once I was done with Seabiscuit, I looked him up, I wrote him a letter, he called me, we had a wonderful conversation, and I knew right away this was what I wanted to write about for my next book.
And it was years of them talking on the phone, her interviewing him, just getting every last detail out of him.
We developed a wonderful relationship with each other. He really became my surrogate grandfather, and he was a tremendous inspiration to me. We had this understanding. He trusted me to be able to articulate this experience in the war, and I think that that made it easier for him to completely open up to me. I think in a way he hadn't opened up to anybody else before, or perhaps even to himself.
Then, since the book came out, it's just been amazing to see it constantly topping the nonfiction charts. I mean, like, record-breaking chart topping. It's insane.
It's a thrill to have you here today.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
It was a wonderful thrill to see how much Louis' story captivated the public. I hear from thousands of family members of veterans and prisoners of war who tell me that their relative was unable to articulate their experience. And in reading Louis' story, they were able to understand better what their relative had gone through.
When I read Unbroken, I thought, oh, we finally got a chance of it going to film.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I wasn't keeping my hopes up because it's been 5 decades and it still hasn't happened. But I believe things happen for a reason, and I think Angie was meant to make the film.
I came across Unbroken and loved it so much, and even the reading of the book changed my life. I was just so inspired by Louis' life, and I knew why so many people love the book. I feel that we need stories like this today in the world. You remember that?
Oh, yeah, that was the beginning. She's dedicated, really dedicated to this movie. She's become a great part of my life now.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
He was very excited when it was finally happening. He was thrilled to meet Angie, and they just hit it off so well, so quickly. He was almost as thrilled just to be her pal as he was to see his life story come to life.
We've spent lots of time together. He's been a part of the script, and he's been a part of the casting, and he's been a part of everything along the way. So I'm making sure as we go that he and Laura both approve of the choices we're making.
Angie brought all the actors over to meet him. So Jack spent some time with the man he was portraying.
I'd have you a foot race, but I'm getting ready to go to bed.
I just feel completely honoured by the fact that I'd be able to immortalise a life story of someone who's arguably lived 3 or 4 lifetimes.
Louis was thrilled about them making it into a film, and I know it did mean a great deal to him to spread the word as much as he could about his story. He wanted to take this terrible hardship that had happened to him and turn it into something good, turn it into a lesson for everyone else. He did not live to see the film completed, but he saw some of it before he died, and he was pleased with everything he saw.
Sorry, Louise, he was fighting again.
I know he was really excited about it. I'm sorry he didn't live to see the premiere, but I think he felt his life was complete, that the lessons he wanted to convey to the world had been conveyed, his legacy was being carried on, and I think he felt he was ready to rest.
I didn't realize it when I was working on it and getting it together, that it was the size and the complexity that it was. We're kind of retracing these extraordinary footprints. And so the journey we're on, I think if it wasn't really difficult and if it wasn't really challenging and if it was easy, we probably would feel like we were not doing justice to Louis.
I think from the difficulties that this film posed, that's why the Coens make the comment that Unbroken would be a mother to shoot. And I spoke to Joel about it, and he said, yeah, I have no idea how you do it.
All right, so we're ready to shoot this. And let's shoot. Take our places.
One of the things that became clear to me is his life wasn't lived in chapters.
This man must be taught respect. Each prisoner will punch this man in his face.
Hey!
The little boy and the man were very similar, but he had to blossom. For me, some of the hardest days were the running. To shoot a race is a very particular thing. When we got to the Olympic Stadium, we had to do the biggest race, and there was nothing there. If done right, visual effects become seamless. But to their credit, I think that really says what a genius job these guys are doing, because they've enhanced the drama and built the worlds.
Get your cameras, boys. I'm gonna light it up like Christmas.
So we wanted with everything to start with the reality of what was it like, down to the planes. We built the B-24 because you've got to put it on a rig and you've got to spin it and twist it and blow water through it.
We had to shoot the exterior and interior shots in it, and the whole thing was, you know, mock-up of a 75-foot-long plane, 12 foot up in the air on a gimbal. Well, it's kind of pretty hard to work, really.
And action.
It makes a huge difference to have the reality of the movement.
I mean, it's just all going around you, and you're just trying to hold on to the flak. Once the flak starts to go, that's affected the plane. So.
All the actors, they had a sense of when certain hits would come, because certain hits had to be very precise. But a lot of the time, we would leave it open, and we would surprise them because we wanted them to have those reactions, and they did, and it did. It makes a huge difference. We have 47 days in the story on the water, and it was very important to us to shoot on the open ocean and find a way to do it there. We wanted to feel the isolation, to understand what it was really like for them, and so you need that expansive view off into the nothing. But in order to do that, you have to go out into a barge, take small boats individually, and then get all the camera equipment there and the cranes, and then lower the boys into the rafts. But what starts happening as soon as there's wind, the barge actually causes a certain amount of friction in the water, and then the barge and the rafts are banging into each other, and everybody's moving up and down, the crane's moving up and down, and it's madness.
And it did give you a sense of the power of the thing around you, that if you look in any direction, all you see is power, which is trying to get you off this tiny little raft you're on. The sense of claustrophobia, being trapped in a raft, and agoraphobia of just open water as far as you can see.
And with the dieting, it wasn't just what they looked like, it was that they understood, you know, to be hungry and to be thirsty and to get dizzy, because they just, you know, their strength was different. In the film, there were different sharks in that water, different types of sharks. The one problem I had, I think it was the mako, and the bluefish, both of them are really cute. Their eyes are really big, like doll eyes, and so they look fake. The mako, turns out, has some pretty scary, nasty teeth, so we featured his teeth. It's nice to have those challenges because then it's not obvious. It's something different, and it makes it an original choice.
This has been a tour of the Pacific and around the world.
Yeah, we're just looking at the position with the two guys. If you pull him out and low, and then hold his hand.
And Australia stood in for Los Angeles, Hawaii, Berlin, and various Pacific islands. It was a place where we could find it all.
And the Australian jungle is not an easy jungle. You go to this location and you feel what they must have felt, which is you've been on the open ocean for so long, and you're so far from home, and you're in your 20s, and you grew up in California, and now you are in the middle of this dense jungle, and you don't understand what people are saying, and you're scared, and you're wet, and you're confused and isolated, and we wanted that kind of feeling, that disorientation for the audience. We wanted them to feel like they had just landed in the middle of a place that was so overwhelming for them, and in fact quite scary, which it was.
Angie's sense from the beginning was that each chapter of Louis' story had a tone to it. So you start with Kwajalein, this kind of isolated jungle. It's pouring rain, like in the middle of nowhere. And you end with Neoetsu, which is kind of this feeling of like this outpost at the edge of the world where he's sent at the end of the war.
We needed to see that it was the end. We needed to feel that it's hell on earth. The war machine had kind of grown in a way where all of these men, that they're just masses and masses of prisoners. I often said it was the ants, you know, there's the trail of ants. And they all lost their identity by this point. They blend so much that there's no even distinction between officer and soldier. It became really obvious to me that the plank scene would be where all themes can come together, and the man can find his strength, his faith, use his athleticism and his resilience, and kind of begin to rise. I was very, very nervous, and I know the boys were really nervous. It felt like preparing two boxers separately in a ring, you know? Spending time with Miyavi, spending time with Jack.
To have that moment where he defies and he lifts up that plank, this impossible task he's been cruelly dealt. It is physically impossible for me to actually fully comprehend what that must feel like. That was a time when I was dieting, so I wasn't really feeling strong anyway. As to whether it helped me, certainly did, but I didn't have the weeks and years on end of pure poverty and no human rights. And I found a certain fury from empathising with that, but I just wanted to make sure the film and everything he'd experienced before, somehow, in some way, was embodied.
That was a really intense scene. So many emotions were going around in Watanabe.
But Angie, she knew that, how I was feeling. She sensed it, how we feel and how hard it is. She knows that. So she can teach us how to express, and it's a great experience.
Yeah, Angie likes to let the actors have their space and find the scene, basically, on set, and I think that's a great way of working. She's also very decisive when she's seen what she's getting. You know, we rarely did more than 1 or 2 takes, which I thought was quite surprising, really.
Her imagination and then what she wants is really clear. It's really simple. That's why now I was able to get into the role immediately.
I felt like my interpretation was welcome. She's just real open about her insight or her expectations from the scene and where she believes each character's at.
recreating this extraordinary life. It wasn't just a privilege, it was also really exciting because it's such a big adventure. From the visual effects to the scale and the size and all of it. So it's been a challenge, but I think somehow Louis does that. Somehow Louis' story brings people together to push themselves to be their best, and everybody comes together and we go against difficult days and impossible schedules and the harsh locations. And Louis joked with me because he prays a lot, and he said, "Did you get your locations?" And he said, "I've been praying. Did you get your locations?" I said, "Hi, we got our locations. Thanks for that." And then last night with the cyclone approaching, I thought, come on, Louis, you gotta pray. Pray we get some sun. Pray we get some sun. And now we get some rain. So the biggest problem that they had in Why It Had Never Been Made is, of course, his life is so full that it seems impossible to get into 2 hours. But it's the essence of what you're telling and what does his story mean. And so what we did in the end was I made these crazy charts of everything from faith to, this is kind of perfect, from faith to his athletic ability. You just kind of find all the themes that go through Unbroken, and you just figure out that all these themes are always in his life, and we kind of map them out. And so we had to condense sections, but we didn't leave anything out. We just brought things together and found a way to make sure that they were all represented at the end of the day. It has not been the easiest shoot. It's a little difficult. The weather does not always agree with you, but you get through it. And here we are. Here we are. I guess we call it.
I don't like the word the greatest. We were the hardy generation. We were hardy because we had to really work hard to stay alive. And overcoming one problem after the other, that gave us a lot of strength.
They'd just come through the Depression, all these young men, but they went full force and they did what was needed of them. And what I've learned from him is that he didn't feel that it was exceptional. He felt that it is a person's duty, a man's duty, to help your community, to help their country.
The whole nation's going to war, and it was in the news. People were worried, but we were kids. You know, you think, well, this is what we have to do. And so that's what I did. I volunteered.
I have felt from the time I started writing this book a tremendous obligation to not only Louis, but to all of the men who fought the Pacific War, to get this story right and to tell this story honestly, in a raw way, the way it really happened.
In Japan at that time, a prisoner of war is the lowest thing that you can find. In their culture, if you surrender, you're no longer a human being. But we learned to live with that.
To give you some idea how we suffered as prisoners of war, there were 22,000 of us taken in Singapore and throughout what used to be the Dutch East Indies. Only 14,000 came back.
The story of the POW and the story of the Pacific War has not been very well articulated in movies or in books. And I feel a huge sense of obligation to get that right. And I wanted to see this story passed along to someone who felt that too, and Angie does.
When they were called to defend their country, they were such young boys and they hadn't even traveled abroad, and they went and they did such a service for all of us.
Angelina, she's been respectful to the fact that all these people really existed. And seems to be the feeling across the movie that we owe a lot to the people, not just as people who are telling a story, but as people who live in the world that was partly created by what they did. I'm playing Russell Allen Phillips, most people call him Phil. He was known as being an amazing pilot. His introduction really in the book, they talk about how the first thing you noticed about him was that you hadn't necessarily noticed him before. He was quiet, you know, he kept to the fringes. His actions speak really loudly. I think they'll show in this film, hopefully, how in control he was. And the fact that anybody survived was a miracle, and I think testament to his skills at the yoke, basically, and in the cockpit.
Prepare to crash. This is Green Hornet. We are going down.
We're gonna die.
I'm playing Mac, Sergeant Francis McNamara. There's not much actually known about him except that he was an orphan. He's ultimately vulnerable and ultimately human.
The chances of their being found were almost zero, and Mac knew it. One of the most shocking things I discovered while I was researching the book was how dangerous it was for these airmen. 15,000 men died in training. Another 36,000 men died in non-combat accidents. The planes had a lot of problems with them. They were being put together very rapidly. The men were being trained very quickly and thrown into combat quickly. Planes would have all kinds of problems and they would just disappear, and thousands of men just disappeared. Different men reacted differently to the circumstances they were in, and I think with Mac, his pessimism pulled him down. And I don't fault him for that. I think it's the way most of us would react to a circumstance like that. I think Phil and Louis were special.
Am I gonna die?
I mean, most guys weren't the miracle that Louis is. So I think it's a reminder of, you know, all the guys that didn't come home.
My brother Pete used to think that I was better than I am.
Who says you're not?
I'm playing Commander Fitzgerald. He was the commander of the submarine USS Grenadier that was attacking the Japanese and was hit by a torpedo, and Commander Fitzgerald ordered the men to go to the bottom of the ocean and try and repair all the damages. So they spent 24 hours at 273 feet below the water surface to repair damages. And once that became impossible, they saved up all their ammunition in terms for their resurface, and the remaining Japanese planes that came over to attack them, they were able to shoot the rest of them down, and Commander Fitzgerald ordered his men to abandon ship, and that's when they were captured.
Who is the commanding officer?
Commander Fitzgerald was a tremendously brave man. He was the ranking prisoner of war in the camps Louis was in, and he was a guy who took horrible punishment to protect his men. He had his fingernails torn out, he was tortured by the Japanese, and he would take any punishment he could to protect them from abuse. He was a real hero.
Fitzgerald kept a journal throughout his years as a POW. It showed a lot of what he felt of his men, what he felt of the situation, what he felt of his family. Fitzgerald had a wife and a child back home, so it's so heartbreaking when you read that it's Peg's birthday today. And with fate and good fortune on our side, I hope to be present for the next one. And it gave a wonderful sense of how genuine he was.
There's much talent in Omori Camp. Who is the opera singer?
Tinker was a dive bomb pilot during World War II. Before the war, he was, studying at Juilliard to be an opera singer, which is extremely impressive.
Frank Tinker became Louis' best friend in camp. He was a very bright man, a very strong survivor, a man very loyal to Louis.
After the war, after his experiences in these prison camps, he went on to serve again in the Korean War as a pilot. And then after that, he actually served as a diplomat in Canada for the United States. He was a cargo pilot for a while, was very active in his community. He raised an amazing family, and he lived a very full life after the war.
Phil was as much a survivor as Louis was. And he did make it through the war just as Louis did, and went on to become a school teacher in Indiana.
He married Cece, had 2 children. I mean, that's what he wanted, and as soon as he got home afterwards, they were married. That's what he'd been waiting for.
Fitzgerald, He went home and he was awarded the Silver Star for his courage within the battle. His story in its own is one to be read about and honored as well. And that's why I feel so honored to play him.
My grandfather was in the Navy in World War II, and he talked about it all the time. But now I get it. I mean, it's the most momentous thing that happens in these guys' lives. And it happens to them when they're not much more than kids.
And those guys who had to serve, these young guys who had to put everything down and go off to Europe or go off to the Pacific and fight and lay their lives down. It's a tall order to ask of an entire generation.
It just shows you what real men were, how real men stood up when everything went wrong around them.
This whole concept is so important that we portray it and tell it. It's quite vital, because otherwise there's a danger that accounts like Louis get lost in history. We owe it to ourselves, to them, to Louis, to everyone that served, to at least remember what's brought us here today.
That generation, they were very proud to be patriotic. They were very proud to love their families. They were very proud of who they were, and they fought for something.
The World War II veterans, and I'm sorry to say, there's very few left, were a very special breed. They call us the greatest generation. And people always think that the reason we're the greatest generation is because we won the war on two fronts, but that's not the case. The reason they call us the greatest generation is because when we all came back under the GI Bill, we all went to college, trade school or something, and we built the biggest country in the world.
I've gone through my whole life drawing from my experiences, both positive and negative. You have to believe that no matter what happens to you, that all things work together for good.
It was the Depression, and I think he had to grow up like a lot of young kids did, very fast during that time.
His first job when he was 5 or 6 years old was he would collect cigarette butts and get a pipe tobacco tin, and he'd empty the cigarette butts into it and take that and sell it to somebody as fresh tobacco.
I was always a survivalist, and being a juvenile delinquent, I was always surviving. My excitement came from seeing what I could get away with.
Louis was always getting beaten up because he was an immigrant who felt like an outsider, who was smoking and drinking and making his parents cry. And he was a troublemaker and a really, really bad, lost kid.
Louis Zamperini, he had bullies that taunted him as a child. Lou had experience with pain and suffering.
He was eclipsed by his older brother, who was a wonderful boy, his brother Pete. And I think Louis was trying to find his own place to get attention, and he couldn't get it by being good, so he was really bad.
I was always doing something crazy. I jumped on a big bamboo pole, and it went down and split apart. When I came up, my toe was in there. And it cut my toe off. And so this woman, she got my mother's sewing machine and got the needle and thread and sewed the toe back on, and it healed. I'm surprised that I'm 97 now, after all the shenanigans I went through as a kid. But no, I was a real burden on my parents, and my brother got a hold of me at just the right time.
His brother recognized that Louis had getaway speed. Every good thief does. And his brother forced him to start running. And Louis discovered in himself that he had incredible, historic speed. And once he recognized that, running was a joy to him.
He started winning early on, and he set the national high school record for the mile and held it for 20 years.
That was covered in newspapers all over the country. He was famous, and when he got to the Olympics, he was famous. But his story of reaching the Olympics is really quite extraordinary. He didn't really have a right to be there in terms of he was too young, and he had never competed at this distance, at the 5,000 meters. But his brother told him to give it a shot, and he did, and he was fast enough. And it was quite remarkable. He tied for the win at the Olympic trials in New York, and he was the youngest distance runner to ever make the U.S. Olympic team.
This picture's been used again and again to show the power of running, the determination. Look at both of our faces. You tell me which one's ready to give up. If you're going to be an athlete, you just can't give up. You got to go all out. And anything you do.
To get to the Olympics, the Olympic team had to take a cruise ship from New York to Germany. And Louis had never seen this much food in one place before.
He had eaten in a restaurant, I believe, once in his life before the Olympics, and they were feeding him anything they wanted all day long, and all Louis could think of doing was eating.
I just went crazy. Even at nighttime at 10 o'clock before I went to bed, I'd go down to the kitchen and the cook would give us ice cream or pie. And so 14 days across the Atlantic, I gained about over 15 pounds.
Which probably slowed him down a lot in the Olympics.
Being the youngest Olympian on the American team, he was placed with a couple of seasoned veterans that could look after him, and that was Jesse Owens and Mac Robinson. Mac Robinson was the brother of Jackie Robinson, who broke the color barrier in Major League Baseball. And so these were his roommates there.
Jesse Owens was like my senior watching over me, trying to keep me out of trouble.
He failed in that respect. Louis actually stole Owens's Do Not Disturb sign off of his door, and Owens at the time was a huge star. So people were knocking at his door day and night, keeping him up, asking for autographs. Louis, I think, almost certainly would have been the first man to break the 4-minute mile. What got in his way was the war. He was on his way to being that fast. He was trimming his time every time he raced in 1940 on his way to the Olympics. But the Olympics were canceled, he went off to war, and he really never got a chance again to try for it. Louis knew if you volunteered, you could choose your service. He wanted to be in the Air Corps, so he volunteered well before Pearl Harbor, and he was actually in training when Pearl Harbor happened. He was in Texas in a theater, and a man walked out on the stage. They stopped the movie and they said, "Pearl Harbor has been bombed. Everybody back to your bases."
December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
He ended up in the Army Air Corps, and they made him a bombardier. And it turned out to be a perfect discipline for him. Bombardier work requires a high level of coordination, a very good grasp of mathematics, and a very steady hand, steady eye, and ability to deal with things in very high-pressure situations. Louis was great at all of that. He was a superb bombardier. I've seen his bombing records, and he consistently led his squadron as the best bombardier there. Superman and Louis' crew went up on a raid of the atoll of Nauru, and they ran into very heavy resistance from the Japanese, both from Zeros in the air and from flak on the ground, and their plane was hit very, very badly. They ended up with 594 holes in the plane. Some of them were as big as beach balls. The plane was absolutely torn apart. They lost one rudder, they lost brakes, they lost flaps, they lost their hydraulics. Practically nothing was working on the plane. It was trying to flip over backwards, and Phil, the pilot, actually had to put his feet on the yoke to hold the plane level on the way home. They flew for 5 hours with the plane falling apart around them, and they made it back. They crash landed, but they made it back. The Green Hornet was the plane that Louis and his crew had to fly in on their last mission, and it was not an airworthy plane.
The Green Hornet was a lemon, a real lemon, but this operations officer, he stopped us, and he said a plane just crashed in just north of Palmyra, B-25, and you're the only crew here. We want you to go and search for him. our plane is being serviced. He said, well, the Green Hornet, it passed inspection, which was a lie.
They were all putting on life jackets upon getting onto the plane because they were anticipating possibly crashing. They were definitely worried about it, and they had a right to be.
And so we took the Green Hornet, we just barely got off the ground, and then everything went wrong.
The plane did not make it back.
You're out in the middle of the largest ocean in the world, and there's no food. Mac panicked, and the first thing he said on the raft, we're gonna die, we're all gonna die, and I had to cool him off with a slap, and finally he kept changing. And I treated him differently because he was changing. I wanted to keep him changing. So everything he did that seemed right, I would compliment him. And so when the sharks tried to jump into the raft, he immediately grabbed the oars and handed me one. That was very gratifying to see this guy come around and become indispensable. He was great. And when he died, he was a different person.
After the crash, Louis and Phil were taken to an island called Kwajalein that was already notorious among American airmen. It was called Execution Island because everyone who had been taken there had been executed by the Japanese.
It's a funny feeling. You're sitting there and your date has been set and you're going to be decapitated. Oh, God. It's hard to live with that thought in your mind.
One of the men who was in on the conference where they decided to execute these two airmen recognized that Louis was a famous runner, an Olympian, and that he had propaganda potential. So they decided to keep these two alive so that they could take Louis to Japan and try to force him to make propaganda broadcasts against America.
In America, when you're missing in action, they have to wait a year before they declare you dead. So the minute they declared me dead in America, the Japanese used that for propaganda. And they condemned America, and then they were taking credit for my survival.
Hello, America. This is the postman calling. He was officially given up as dead and missing. We assure Mrs. Zamperini that such is not the case. The next voice heard will be that of First Lieutenant Louis Zamperini.
Hello, mother, father, friends. This is your Louis talking. This will be the first time in 2.5 years that you will have heard my voice.
And then they handed me this propaganda sheet, and I read it, and I said, I can't do it. There's no way I can do it. I'd rather be dead than to turn on my country. They were trying to break me, and then the worst thing was the bird was always after me. So in a barracks of 70 men, I would always stand way in the back. So when they came around for inspection with his two guards, he wouldn't see me. But he comes in with the two guards, and the guards holler, "Chesky!" Everybody comes to attention. He's looking for me, maybe for 6 or 8 seconds. Ah, Zamperini, you come to attention last. A big lie, just so he could take his big heavy belt off and with about a 1.5 pound steel buckle. And oh God, he hit me in the temple. And I just hit the deck so fast I can't remember. In prison camp, you focus on determination. You don't want to die. That's a race for life. And you want to win, and you won't give up. I tell you, the greeting at the airport when I came home, oh God, that's an emotion I can never explain. Unbelievable.
Now, the life we are about to relive is an American saga of courage and stamina that perhaps has no equal in the annals of sports or war, from the heroes of ancient Greece to our own day. This is your life, Louis Zamperini. Louis, come out here.
When Louis got back to the United States, he was kind of dazzled by his sudden fame. His story had appeared in the New York Times, and everyone knew he was this miracle survivor. He had been given up for dead, and suddenly he was alive and had this incredible story to tell, and he was a huge star. But he was inside starting to come apart emotionally.
My post-traumatic stress was pretty severe the last year of the war, and then it followed me on home, and I couldn't get anything out of my mind.
Like a lot of prisoners of war, he began to experience terrible nightmares. When he'd hear a car backfire, he would think he was in combat, and all of a sudden he would see POW camp around him.
Every night he was having this recurring nightmare of being beaten by the bird. He'd gone to the VA hospital, you know, trying to get help. They couldn't figure it out.
So he self-medicated. He just drank. He drank a lot just to deal with it. I was just an infant when he still had his PTSD, and so I don't really remember the arguments between him and my mother.
He went through some terrible years where he was destroying his marriage, but Louis was saved by his wife's insistence that he go to see a sermon by Billy Graham, who at that time was a very young man, not very well known, but he was speaking in Los Angeles. Louis didn't want to go, but his wife was going to leave him. And he agreed on that basis to go see him speak. And he sat in the back of the audience, and he was unhappy and he was sullen. But Graham spoke of things that resonated with Louis, with his experience about how God reaches into people's lives and helps them get through things that seem unsurvivable.
I think all the prisoners had basically made the same prayer: get me home alive to my family, God, and I'll seek you, I'll serve you. And you make promises while you're under a dire situation. But how many of them keep their promise? I didn't. And so my life fell apart.
And it was at that moment that he made this realization to himself that he thought God had actually helped him through this, and he owed God something. And he realized what he needed to do.
So I went forward in the meeting and made my confession of faith in Christ, and I couldn't believe what happened. While I was still on my knees, my life changed in a matter of moments, because I knew I was through getting drunk, and I knew that I forgave my guards, and I knew it was a miracle because I forgave the bird. And that was the first night. First night in 2.5 years I didn't have a nightmare, and I haven't had one since.
And Louis realized that God can forgive him for all the rotten things he did in his life, that he ought to be able to forgive those that had done him wrong. So forgiving the guards and the bird was actually salvation for him. It really turned him around in an instant.
He decided he needed to test his forgiveness to see if he really had truly achieved it. And he went back to Japan to meet the guards who had abused him so terribly. And he went to Sagama prison, where they were all being held for war crimes.
He went to every single one and looked him in the eye and told him that he forgave him for the treatment that he received when he was a prisoner of war.
He felt no animosity. He just felt compassion, and they couldn't believe it. He couldn't believe it. It was a wonderful experience. He knew he had truly forgiven then.
I think it's incredible that he forgave them. That's a lesson that he taught my father and me. By hating somebody, I'm not hurting them, I'm only hurting myself. You can forgive anybody. Forgiveness is always possible.
The bird was not in custody when Louis went back to Japan in 1950, so Louis didn't meet him. Louis was actually told at the time that the bird was believed to have committed suicide. So Louis thought the bird was dead until many, many years later, 1997, I believe it was. Someone told him the bird actually was alive and had survived. He said he nearly fell out of his chair when he was told that the bird was still alive. And the first thought he had was, I want to meet him. The bird refused to meet him, but Louis was at peace with it all. He had forgiven the bird.
Well, if you don't forgive, it's eating on your soul. Forgiveness must be complete, no matter who the person is. And I've had a few enemies, even the last few years, and the only way I can forgive them is to pray for them. And that's what I do. Instead of hating them, I pray for them. And you just have to buckle up and go on to greater things.
Since then, Lou, you've been devoting your life to wayward boys so that our youth, through God, may have a better tomorrow.
Victory Boys Camp in its original form was an actual physical camp. Louis would take juvenile delinquents, basically young criminals, youth authority kids. He'd take them up to the mountains, just get them active and focused on things besides the petty crimes or big crimes even that they were involved in.
I think it has to do a lot with his older brother. I mean, when he was a kid, he was like the kids he was helping, you know, he was doing all the bad stuff. And I think he kind of took that place when he did find God and start to take that place of his older brother that did to him. You know, his older brother took him by the hand and took him out and made him run. And he took these kids out of juvie and he'd take them into the wilderness and made them hike.
The main thing about the program is accomplishment. These are kids that quit high school. They haven't accomplished anything. So I have a chart. And all during the week, they gotta pass everything. Boating, and I get them up on the top of the mountain and teach them glacier survival and rescue. So then at the end of the week, I show the kids, look at the things you've accomplished all week. They weren't easy. It shows that you can accomplish anything you want. Now you go back and finish your time, and then go back and get your high school diploma, and that's the first big accomplishment of your life.
I think the spirit of Victory Boys Camp was finding somebody in need and being that caring figure that they may not have had in their life. And that continued all through his life. Once he was speaking on a cruise and he was, telling his story, and at the end of it, someone stood up and said, "Hey, I went to Victory Boys Camp when I was a kid and it changed my life." So it has had a great impact on some lives.
I think he wanted to teach other people how much they could survive. That there's much more we can accomplish and overcome than we realize.
I'd like for you to welcome, please, Mr. Louis Zamperini.
He would go and volunteer and speak to churches, speak to schools. I think it was cathartic for him to be able to share that and know that that story could have an impact on other people in a positive way.
The guy says, aren't you the guy that spent 47 days on a raft? I said, yeah. He said, you're entitled to travel pay. I said, what? He said, for a very efficient guy. He said, $7.60 a day times 47. He made out a bill, mailed it to Washington, and a week later we got a response, and it said, request denied, reason, travel unauthorized.
Let me tell you about Louis. Those days at sea changed him completely. And he had a fiber that very few men have. And his thinking was totally different. The difference is that he appreciated life.
When he first met our mom, his idea of a good time was getting all the rolls of toilet paper he could find in the hotel that he was staying at in Miami Beach and flinging them out the window and creating all of his own, party favors. And he just was a practical joker.
It's very funny.
One of the things he did is his very good buddy was getting married. And so Louis went and dressed up like a woman and showed up at the bridal shower as the jilted girlfriend and got the bride's family just furious at Gordon, who was his friend getting married. And that's just the way he was. He was a practical joker, outstanding sense of humor.
And let me tell you, if Louis counted you as a friend, that was something special. It really was. Well, one of the times he told me, he says, I'm going skiing next week and all that. And I said, Louis, you're nuts. I said, your frail body, if you run into a tree, you'll never make it. He says, no, I'll be all right.
He skied till he was 91. My favorite thing was to ski behind him. because here's this white-haired old man who skied so beautifully with such grace, like a ballet dancer. And I love to watch all the other skiers on the slope pull to the side and say, "Did you see that old man?"
It was fun. he was like 64 or 65, and he's still on the skateboard in the church. And my boss had to tell him, go tell him that he cannot skateboard in the grounds.
Actually, I learned how to skateboard in the parking lot of that church, being taught by my grandfather 20 years ago. He skateboarded until he was 81 and finally had to quit. He was extremely active his entire life.
Hi, George. Hi, Ivy. How are you?
When you need something, he always finds a way to help you. And I never say, Louis, I need help. He always says, you need help? Let me help you.
In our lifetime, we saw him run to people's rescue, help them multiple times, maybe 3 years ago. So he was 93, 94, and it was raining really hard. And we got this call from his neighbor, Coleman, and he said, I picked it up, he said, Louis Zamperini is the greatest man in America. You know where he is right now? He's on my roof, throwing a tarp over my roof because I have leaks. You know, that's the kind of person he was. I mean, he would go out of his way to help anybody, strangers, neighbors.
Well, you know what it is to help people. It's very gratifying. It gives you a kind of a strength you never have otherwise. As long as you're alive, you can be useful, purposeful. You've got to live your life to the end, and you've got to function well to the end, and you've got to be charitable to the end.
Over the 4th of July weekend, the flags of the city flew at half-staff to remember a man we call
our hometown hero. And now we're here today to celebrate the life of Louis Zamperini.
I was actually on my way to bed on the night of July 2nd, and I heard my cell phone make a little noise and decided to check that last message, and it was Louis' daughter Cynthia telling me he had passed away that night. And I got down on my floor and had a good long cry about it. And I felt almost surprised that he had died, even though he was 97 years old, because he seemed immortal. And not just because he had faced death over and over and found a way through every time, but because his spirit was so strong, so vital, that it seemed immortal.
My grandfather has been a lot of things to a lot of people. He's a testament to the strength and resilience of the human spirit. But to me, he's always just been my grandpa, the loving, kind, and generous man who went above and beyond to give me a chance at a better life than he had, and the wisdom to be a better man than he was. That's a tough act to follow.
While my heart is indeed broken, we won't get to see Louis on the red carpet. His spirit and love of life will remain unbroken for eternity.
The last time I talked to him before he passed away, I said, Dad, you're dying today, but your work continues, and his story is being told to millions and millions and millions for years to come.
I brought the film to the hospital the day before he went to ICU, and it was amazing. It was amazing because it was looking at this beautiful, beautiful face of this 97-year-old man with still sparkling, beautiful blue eyes, and showing him his life. When he first saw the planes, it starts with the planes, and he saw Domhnall, and he said under his breath, Phil. And I thought, oh, Phil. He remembers Phil. Like, it had nothing to do with whether or not I did a good shot or whether or not the movie's great. He was just seeing Phil. And when the flak went off, he jumped and had a reaction because that was the war he was in, and he remembers those days. And when he was running, when he watched himself running, I can't explain what that, I felt so privileged to be witnessing this moment, watching somebody who's at the end of their life, watching himself be at the peak of his physical ability and seeing himself with his brother, who, you know, in Louis' mind, he was a very, very devout Christian and believed as soon as he passed away, he would be with Pete again and his mom and dad, and So to watch him reflect and kind of visit with them and remember their times together right before he was preparing to be with them in heaven, it was extraordinary. It's extraordinary.
His optimism, his spirit, whatever that mysterious thing about him was, it helped him survive through all of this stuff. He'd nearly died so many times, but particularly on the life raft and particularly in prison camp, he just felt that, he felt strongly in his faith that God was guiding his life to some ultimate great purpose. And we should all be so lucky to be able to look back on our lives and see a pattern like that.
To see this man who's lived through so much and surrounded by a family who loves him because he was such a great dad and such a great grandfather. Friends who miss him so much because he was that influence in their life. He changed so many people's lives, and he changed my life.
He had kind of a code and a lot of little sayings that he passed to me that I have to remind myself of all the time. And one of them is, you can overcome anything. If you have the willpower and the resolve to get through whatever life throws at you, and you remain cheerful through it all, you'll beat it.
The interesting thing is, while I mourn him, I wish I could call him up now, I feel him with me every day. And I don't think I'm going to miss him as I have other people, just because I feel like he has infused my life with so much love and so much knowledge of how to live well. The lessons he taught me, I reach and touch every day in one way or another. And I have gratitude for my life because of him. And in that way, he will stay with me forever. He will be a lesson to everyone who reads or watches his story. For as long as people watch movies or read books, I think they're going to look to Louis for inspiration, and they're going to find it there.
Accept the darkness. Live through the night. Love thine enemy.
It's easy to talk forgiveness, but what does it actually look like?
When Lou came home from the war, he became an instant celebrity. Life of parties and people paying attention to you, and Lou came home with a pretty amazing story.
He was kind of dazzled by his sudden fame. Everyone knew he was this miracle survivor. He had been given up for dead, and suddenly he was alive and had this incredible story to tell, and he was a huge star.
He tried to fit back into a world that was completely different than when he had left it.
But he was inside starting to come apart emotionally, just from all the trauma he had gone through.
When Louis came back from the war, he was a damaged person. He held on to his hatred for the bird and his other captors.
My father was drinking a lot and heavily to self-medicate.
He was violent, he was an alcoholic, he was plagued with nightmares.
Night after night, he woke up having the same nightmare of grabbing the bird by the throat and strangling him. He had plotted to save up enough money to get back to Japan and find him and take care of him. And I mean, kill the guy.
His life was a shambles. He was destroying his marriage, and I think he was heading toward drinking himself to death.
Many times I wished that I could have been there for this beautiful young man. I don't know what I could have done, but I just would have done everything to comfort him and protect him.
One night, he was strangling the bird in his dreams, and he woke up and found that he was strangling my mother.
That was the turning point.
She thought, this is it, I've had enough, it's time for divorce. A young couple that lived in the apartment building that they lived in came to them and said, we want to take you to see a new young evangelist in downtown Los Angeles named Billy Graham.
Louis didn't want to go, but his wife was going to leave him.
So my dad grudgingly went. He didn't want to be preached to. He didn't want to be told there was anything wrong with him. He walked out. It just wasn't for him. So my mother managed to talk him into going a second time.
He said, okay, I'll go, but you know, when it comes to the point where they say every head shall bow and every tongue confess, I'm out of there.
He was headed out again and then heard something that stopped him in his tracks.
There was a point in the sermon where Billy was saying, when people come to the end of their rope and have nowhere else to turn, they turn towards God. And as he was exiting the row and wanting to leave and go home, he was thinking, that's right. Everything he went through in his entire life brought him to that moment.
He instantly forgave his captors.
He stopped smoking. He stopped drinking. The nightmares, they stopped, never to return.
He decided he needed to test his forgiveness to see if he really had truly achieved it. And he went back to Japan to meet the guards.
He told me that while he was on that flight, he was really thinking, I've forgiven them, but can I look them in the eye and forgive them? He found that all the prison guards were in Sugamo prison because they were considered war criminals. He got into the prison, and face to face, he looked everyone in the eye and told them that he forgave them.
I think he needed to forgive so badly that he just needed the vehicle.
He comes back from Japan, and he wants to do something else. He wants to give back.
He had a soft spot in his heart for troubled boys, like he had been. So he established a camp for boys called the Victory Boys Camp.
He would befriend them and teach them survival skills.
They'd hear his story. They'd want to know what saved him from his spiraling down.
Well into his 90s, he was still flying across the United States, sometimes around the world, to do these talks about faith and forgiveness.
When someone would meet my dad later on in life, they would expect him to be a bitter, worn man from his experiences, but he was the most happy, joyful person you would ever want to meet.
I viewed Lou as who he was, which was a man like any other, but a man with an extraordinary life.
It's impossible to sum him up in one word.
Resilient.
Courageous.
Kind.
Loving.
Is it cliche to say unbroken?
It said in the script, the men are performing Cinderella, and that's all it said, really. When I started chatting with Angie about this pantomime, I happened to mention that my first foray into acting was playing a daffodil, holding a daffodil with a yellow thing around my head in my local village pantomime. So I mentioned this to Angie, and she said, great, you can write the pantomime. I said, okay. So one lunchtime, I went to my trailer and scribbled it down at 4 pages of Cinderella.
Cinderella! Cinderella! Oh, Cinderella! Where is that naughty little maggot? You seen her, fella?
supposed to get ready for the ball with you sitting there doing nothing?
That's about as useful to us as our morning dance routines. Run me a nice hot bath so I can soothe my aching limbs.
You, sister, could not get clean if you bathed in the tears of a nun for a month of Sundays.
We have no more hot water, and we're not allowed in the bathhouse for another week.
Oh. Fix my dress so I can catch the eye of the dreamy Prince Hildenbrand.
You couldn't catch the eye of a prince if it fell in your lap. Cinders, fix my hair.
Fix my dress.
Fix my hair.
Dress.
Hair, 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 hair.
What's he speaking kraut now?
Enough. You guys make me do all these stupid, impossible things with no food and no rest. And you lock me up in a rabbit hutch. I've had enough.
Tis I, dear child, old lady from the woods.
Hello, old lady. You must be so cold. Let me get you something hot to drink.
No, 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 dear child. You've been working like a slave all day. I have come to grant you a wish. Anything your heart desires.
Anything?
Aye.
A flight to California?
Just check. There's no flights today, but soon, maybe.
Well, what I really want is to go to the ball, but I guess it's hopeless.
Nothing in this life is hopeless, Cinders. If you follow your head and your heart, you can do anything. Dear child, I am your fairy godmother. And because you are strong-hearted, brave, and good-willed, you shall go to the ball.
Oh, well, all I have is these rags for clothes, and I haven't washed in 2 months.
No, that attitude will not do here. Now, go to the mess and get me 1 turnip, 2 maggots, and 6 white rice balls. Off you go. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I need your help here. With your help and a wee bit of blacky magic, I will turn these things into a beautiful carriage. Wait for it! A beautiful carriage, 2 handsome footmen, and 6 white horses. Now, come on, boys and girls. You don't know how you can get. Hubble, hubble, carriage nonetheless. Now, come on, Cinders, off you go. You have no time to lose. Whoa, that's it, you're in now, you're in. Now you better hold your horses. Oh, come on. Now, what the warning, Cinders. The spell wears off at midnight, so just remember that. And one more thing. Take these beautiful glass slippers. Me? Oh, they'll make you dance to any tune. And off you go, my dear. Enjoy yourself. I will find your prince. And when you do, give him one for me.
It really happened. They really performed a production of Cinderella in Amori, and they made the bird master of ceremonies and made him a special throne so that he would feel important and therefore allow us to do this. So yeah, it's based on historical truth. As I started to write it, I realised that Cinderella could be a brilliant metaphor for the prisoners, so Cinderella representing the men and the guards being represented by the ugly sisters.
Yes, that's about as useful to us as our morning dance routines.
And so that kind of led me into chucking in the jokes about the bathhouse.
But we have no more hot water, and we're not allowed in the bathhouse for another week.
By slipping in the odd jibe about prison life, I thought it would be a good way, or something they might have done anyway, to boost the men's morale, further than just putting on the play. Pucker up, boys, pucker up.
The costumes were made by us, by whatever we could sort of find around the yard, pieces of rope, untwining them for hair.
The more you guys can talk to props and wardrobe about, you know, like what kind of things you see and what you'd like to try and what's around and who wants to jump in, you know,
Great.
I think that would be fun.
These are shells from from when we're dropping the banjos off into the sea. So it's all meant to be stuff we've found lying around and made into stuff.
These boobs are not easy to come by. They're horsehair stuffed pillows.
I'm going to see if I can keep this costume for the rest of the film. It might be weird, but...
I'm gonna take mine back to New York, actually.
Yeah?
Yeah. Fix my dress so I can catch the eye of the dreamy Prince Hildenbrand.
Putting that together that week was fun. It was fun to do, it was fun to rehearse, it was fun to put those costumes on for the day and have a sort of break from the kind of monotony of prison life.
Che profumino!
Ho fatto gli gnocchi. Ciao.
Brava. Sono infame. Andiamo?
Aspetta, ti devo dire una cosa. È successa una cosa con lui.
Che è successo?
Ha rubato e ha
Ma
fatto
chi,
a
lui?
pugni. Ha fatto a pugni, ha rubato. E domani devi andare alla polizia.
Come ti permetti?
Hey, Pete, wake up.
What is it?
It's a Zeppelin. Biggest flying machine ever built. It's on some kind of world tour from Germany.
Scary.
It's only an airship. It's not gonna hurt anybody.
No, the darkness. It ain't funny.
It spooked you, huh?
I ain't scared. I just didn't know you could have dark. And then darker.
If you shut your eyes, it's darker still.
You believe in all that stuff the father was saying about living in the light and dark?
You know he's talking about people, right? About the light and the dark inside.
I know what he was talking about. How do you know which one you are?
What do you mean?
What if I had darkness in me?
No, you don't.
You don't know that.
You're my brother. I know everything about you. Plus, the other kind of person wouldn't bother to ask.
Get set.
you hear that? Hey. Did you hear that?
Hey, Mac, did I ever tell you about my girl? Cece. I sent her money for a ring in my last letter. I told her I'd be home soon. And I'd take her away, someplace no one would ever find us.
This would work.
I'm getting married.
And cut.
Generous, didn't make you.
Don't let it go to waste, can we?
We've got a bit of protein today.
Yeah, things are looking up.
What's this? Seaweed and meat. I think it's horse's arse.
Yeah, see the marks from where the jockey was hitting it?
What's serving us racehorse? Here's me thinking it's some regular old horse he has. Louis. He's not for a singer, for an Olympic bloody athlete. Not going to serve us plain horse arse.
It's my son Jack's 9th birthday today. And I envision a nice birthday party with a lot of friends. Ice cream, cake.
Sounds real nice, Commander.
Well, with fate and good fortune on our side, each and every one of you will be invited to celebrate his 10th. Except for Miller.
Here we go.
Why is it you don't salute me? Officers do nothing all day. It's bad for morale. It's better you work like a man. Set an example.
Corporal, the Geneva Convention says that officers don't. The Geneva Convention, Article 2, prisoners of war. The Geneva Convention.
This is not Geneva.
Article 2.
This is Japan. I'll volunteer. You can't order an officer to work, but I'll volunteer. Volunteer. That's good. Yes. You may all volunteer.
Get down!
Pop, ci prendi tutti così?
Sì, perfetto.
Fermi tutti, dai. Louis!
Mandami la foto, papà.
Grab your gear. They're moving us out.
What's that?
Oh, boy. What a deal.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Rutger!